Hey guys, Josh and Pops here. We just got back from a crazy summer exploring Alaska, having a blast, but one of the highlights was being able to drive the Alaska Highway.
The Alaska Highway is a place you gotta drive sometime. It's incredibly gorgeous, but it's the kind of thing you gotta be prepared for too. And so we got a handful of tips here we'd like to give you, and so let's jump in.
So our first tip is that you really need to plan some time to do this trip. I wouldn't do it in any less than 5 days. While it's certainly possible to do it faster if you put in a lot of hours driving, you would miss the point of doing a route like this. There's so much beauty to see, so many adventures to have along the way, and so much history to dive into. If you do it too fast, then you'll miss out on all of that. We did it in 6 days with one full day exploring the city of Whitehorse, and that was pretty much perfect for us. It was long days, but it worked out really well.
The next tip we wanted to give you is just to understand how remote this road is. There are certainly cities and some towns along the way, but there are large sections of the drive where there is absolutely nothing. It's a good idea to prepare for this with simple car maintenance tools and making sure you fill up with gas whenever you see it. We tried not to let our car get below half tank ever, and never really had trouble with gas as a result. If you're driving in an RV or a car that gets worse gas mileage, this could be an issue. But also remember to always bring water, drinks, and snacks in case you can't find a place to eat along the ride.
Following that, our next tip is just to be prepared that everything is more expensive than you think it would be. Gas is much more expensive than it is in the United States. Food is almost always $20 Canadian a person, and hotels are often pricier as well, as there's not a lot of them along the drive. The exchange rate is currently more favorable if you're coming from the United States, but it is something that you definitely want to prepare for and plan a little bit more money than you think you might need.
It's important to know that there's really not a lot of food options along the way or places to stay as you're on the route. Now this is a non-issue for campers and RVers, as there's lots of places for them. That's actually really cool, the number of places. But if you want to stay at a hotel, especially in the section between like Fort Nelson and Whitehorse, the options are very, very limited and not that great. The same can be said for food. Don't plan on there being a restaurant when you want it, and don't be too picky about your food choices. Burgers are the main thing you're going to find on the route, but even then, large sections will be there with nothing at all. We were always able to find a place to stay and to eat, but it's because Josh in particular booked everything ahead of time, which is going to be the next recommendation.
Yeah, so to piggyback on what Pop said, I booked most all of the hotels a few months in advance on a site that allowed me to cancel if something came up. I wanted to have the shell of the trip booked, and I would recommend that you do the same. There was a night in Watson Lake where I ran into two couples that were trying to find a hotel, but were striking out in town as everything had sold out. And if you're only trying to get a hotel, it may be 40 or 50 miles to the next town where you might be able to find one. So you definitely want to book it in advance if you can. Also, it's best to use a site that allows you to cancel if you need to, as plans may change and you want to be able to have that flexibility going in.
Changing topics just a little bit, we just want to mention about the metric system versus the Imperial system. Obviously, Imperial system US, metric system in Canada. Be sure to note that so you understand how far you are from where you're going, and so that you don't get caught speeding as you're going along and driving. In many newer cars, you're actually able to change back and forth from kilometers per hour to miles per hour on the speedometer. So if you're able to do that, it'll make it a lot easier for you.
Also, in terms of driving safely, our next tip is to watch out for wildlife. We saw so much wildlife on our drive and made sure to be constantly on the lookout, as animals would occasionally run across the road and would often be right alongside you on the road. Pairing this with how remote the drive is, it can be a recipe for a bad time if you get in an accident and are not easily able to call for help. Enjoy the wildlife, as it's one of the highlights of the entire drive, but be sure you're always looking out for them. You never know where they're going to be.
If you've watched some of our videos before, you know I'm always into the history. And when you drive a road, especially like the ALCAN, it's such a unique and rich history. It's a good idea to take some time researching and understanding what you're going to see before you head out. Books like Tales of the Cat Skinner will give you a deeper understanding of the construction difficulties faced with such a long road that was built in such a short period of time, and allow you to uncover some of the stories that are hidden from those who just drive the road. Without this information, it's easy too to overlook important stops. For example, like Contact Creek, which knowing about them will make your trip even more enjoyable.
Just to add to that, our next tip is to make sure you stop at the visitor centers if you have time to see them. There are many of them along the way, and they are a great way to ask questions and to see if there are any upcoming things to stop at that you might not have been aware of. We found the people working at the visitor centers to be amazing on this road and had great conversations with many of them. So be sure to stop in and see one of them if you have the time.
Our last tip is you absolutely have to get the Milepost magazine. It is the ultimate resource on the drive. Will tell you basically everything that you're driving past: roadside markers, bathrooms, gas stations, and even places to eat. I almost always had it open while we were driving and was constantly using it to see what was ahead on the road. So once again, you've got to get the Milepost magazine to do this route.
All right, 2 more random tips before we end this video. The first is to know that there's a lot of light on the ALCAN during the summer. While this can lead to long days, it also makes for a more relaxed drive as you're not trying to rush somewhere before it gets dark. Sure, things will still close at a normal hour, but if you want to, you can be hiking well into 9 p.m. before the sun sets, depending on where you're driving. This is of course only applicable in the summer, as is all of these recommendations. I have no idea how you would drive this road in the winter, and it's definitely a different beast than whatever we're talking about.
As you would imagine, traveling on a remote route like this, your cell phone reception is pretty much non-existent. Be sure to download maps offline so you can plan your stops. We downloaded offline Google Maps every night at the hotel for the next day, but you can do this in advance as well. Also, don't always plan on the hotel Wi-Fi being that great. Overall, we always had it, but sometimes it was practically non-existent because it was slow, or you had to sit in the lobby even to use it. Just plan on not having a lot of cell phone coverage. And whatever you have, just consider that a plus.
So that's it, some of our top tips for the Alaska Highway. Be sure to leave any that you have in the description, and you can see all of our Alaska Highway videos in the description as well. We'll see you on the next one.